Hello and salam. Welcome to the Muslim Viewpoint, powered by American Muslim Today, the non-profit national digital newspaper that's transforming the narrative about Muslims in Western countries through public service and community journalism. I'm Rifat Malik. I'm AMT's editor-in-chief. And as we are just days away from critically important midterm elections, we have interviews with two trailblazing Muslim women of color who are making political headway on both sides of the coast. Fighting in the name of education, conservation, and innovation, these women are doing their part to make their voices heard and to make politics more representative. Let's start with Ghazala Hashmi, who is Virginia's first Muslim and first South Asian senator. As she stands for re-election, she tells us how working in higher education influenced her decision to run for office, the significant role education plays in a person's life, and the changes she hopes to make by combating anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Ghazala Hashmi, thank you for joining us today. So you have already been elected in your state. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you felt it was important to run for office, and what kind of obstacles or pushback did you face in your campaign?
Thank you, and it's wonderful to join you today. So my rationale or impetus to run really came from two different sources. And one of those sources was the fact that I'd been working in higher education in Virginia for close to 30 years. And for the last 20 years, I'd spent that time in the community college system in Virginia. And it was working with students and seeing the ways in which government and policies in higher education were impacting their lives, making it challenging for them to finish their degree programs and to actually succeed in the ways that we want people to succeed. I knew that we could do things better. The state government had been increasing tuition costs in Virginia. The cost of textbooks has been rising significantly. And so a lot of my students face those challenges, but it wasn't just higher education policy that was affecting them. I had students who would become homeless in the middle of a semester, or they faced food insecurity. And when there's such a host of social problems around their lives, they are not able to focus on their academic work. And so one of the reasons that compelled me to run for political office rather than just move in higher education policy issues was the fact that I wanted to be at the table and make decisions that would help the folks that I was working with make their lives a little bit easier, make their futures a little bit more possible. So that was one reason for me to run. And a second reason was, frankly, the election of Donald Trump. So when he was elected in 2016, he came in on a wave of anti-Muslim rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric, and just promoted the division and bigotry that has been a part of this country, and he supported that language. And that was deeply concerning to me. I'd lived in this country for close to 50 years at that point. I saw myself fully as an American. I taught American literature. I taught the values of the development of American philosophy and democracy. And I knew that everything that Trump was saying was antithetical to the kind of country that has been established and the direction we wanted to move in. So my first reaction was just to organize academic conferences around what it means to be Muslim in America. But I saw such an outpouring of engagement from folks in the community, people who wanted to learn more and be a part of this conversation. And so that led me to be more politically engaged. And so by 2018, I was ready to actually run for office myself. So as a first-time political candidate and as someone who came out of a non-political background, it was a big step for me, but it just felt right. And I knew I had to speak up, and I had to represent the people and the issues that I care about.
And during your campaign, did you, I mean, you lived in your community, I imagine, for many years. Did you see a side of the community perhaps inspired by the national rhetoric that you just mentioned? Did you see a side of the community that you hadn't seen before in terms of, how your faith was perceived? Did it become an issue in your campaign and during your election?
It actually did not. When I first started running, I wasn't running as a Muslim candidate. I was running as an educator, as a mom who had lived in the community for 30 years, as a Girl Scout troop leader, and all of the ways in which my family had been engaged and involved in the community. And that was my focus. My religion and my faith did become an issue for the media once they realized that I was a Muslim and an immigrant, and that there would be history to be made if I was elected as the first Muslim to serve in the Virginia Senate. Then that became kind of an issue that was brought to the forefront. The overwhelming response, and my district is not heavy with an immigrant population or with a South Asian population. It is almost 75% Caucasian, and the remaining is African American, with a very small immigrant or Hispanic population there. So I was running on the values and the issues that really impact our communities. I was talking about education. I was talking about healthcare and access to transportation. So those are the concerns that really resonated, I think, with the folks in the community. And of course, there was bigotry. There was Islamophobic rhetoric, but that's largely in the domain of social media. And I am very adept at ignoring social media, so I really didn't pay any attention to that kind of language. And so much of it came from outside the district and outside of Virginia. So the folks that I knew, and the communities and the relationships I had built, those folks knew me, and they were very excited about the campaign. I had friends and neighbors who had always voted Republican, but because they knew me personally, they were happy to support me in this particular race.
So, I mean, that's actually really wonderful to hear. Would you recommend running for office? I think there are two other minorities, and in particular American Muslims, who perhaps do feel a little concerned about the possible pushback they might get in terms of their faith, or feeling targeted. Is there something that you could say to them, do you think, that would encourage them to take that leap?
I think if anybody has a desire to run for office and has the support of family, that's the most important thing. Your family has to be behind you, has the support of family and friends, that they should really do that. Every group, every minority group has faced some level of targeting. It is part of the political climate, and it has always been part of the political climate. When John Kennedy was running, he was the first Catholic to be running on the national stage, and he was targeted for his Catholicism. We see now we elected Joe Biden, a Catholic, and there was not even a murmur of conversation around his Catholicism. So whether one is Jewish or African American, Muslim, or Hindu, those issues will invariably come up. But at the end of the day, what people really care about is how you are going to represent them, their families, how you're going to address the issues that they care about, and what impacts their lives. And I think being conscious of that and speaking to those concerns is what's really important.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. Just as a last question, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the media, and also outside media, and for me, that kind of resonates with, the idea that it is a sort of unregulated national sort of media and social media that is sort of causing a lot of the issues and a lot of the polarized political discourse. Obviously, politicians and public figures are engaged in that as well. How important in this context do you think it is that we have a platform that is generated by minorities, and in this case, American Muslims? How important do you think that it is to have that kind of platform that tries to redress the balance, project an image that just isn't getting out there, that the American Muslims like you and like so many others, especially in this recent election, are contributing, or whether it's you as public officials, or whether it's health professionals on the front line, or educators? American Muslims are very integrated in the society. So I just wondered if you thought the idea of a Muslim media platform was something that could be advantageous to bridging the divide.
Absolutely. I think it's so essential to have the representation through media platforms and through excellent journalists such as yourself, who are going to highlight those stories that otherwise would remain invisible. As you well know, a lot of times when mainstream media highlights stories of minority communities, it's through a particular lens. And for Muslims, sadly, it's been through the lens of political violence and through issues that are internationally related. But American Muslims as a community have largely remained invisible. And the fact that we are so integrated throughout the fabric of this country, and have been for well over a century, those stories need to be shared and told. Again, it was a strong reason for me to run, is that the folks that I worked with did not even realize I was Muslim. Many of them didn't know that I was Muslim. One never talks about their faith, right, at work usually. And so by becoming visible, then people around us are able to say, oh, I do know a Muslim, and I do know this family, and I've worked with them, and I know their heart, and I know what they are contributing to this country. So our media in particular has a very significant role, and it's to share those stories, to push back against the dominant narrative, and to really underscore and highlight the many, many contributions that Muslim Americans have made in every profession in this country. So it's very, very important.
Now let's hear from Farah Khan, who is also standing for re-election. She is the mayor of Irvine in California. She's the first Muslim woman to lead a large city in the United States, and is also the first person of color to hold this position in the city's history. She discusses her predecessor and the mistakes she learned from, and how she felt she was the right person to lead her city.
When I first started was basically from community services. So I was very engaged in the community, working on different issues. But at the same time, I found myself showing up at council meetings, speaking up during public comments, talking to our representatives who seemed to be just neglecting the community's needs. So it was so important for me, especially when people reached out and said, hey, why don't you try running for that office since you're there all the time? And when I did decide that I would try and venture into running for office, it wasn't an easy journey. Even folks from my side of the party were basically saying that, maybe our city wasn't ready for so much diversity, and maybe someone with a name like mine was unelectable. And so those were things that really were meant to kind of dissuade me from running. But at the same time, from my background, that was really the propeller that got me to run and run even harder. And so I didn't win my first election. I ran in 2016 for the first time, and I didn't win that election, but I did build name recognition. So, out of 11 candidates that were running in 2016, I think I came in around 4. And then I ran again in 2018. And that's really when I took those negative comments. People were always associating me with terrorist organizations, and making it seem like I had links with people that I shouldn't have links with, just because my donors were, part of CARE or we're part of any other Islamic organization that is established in the US. And so for me, it was just owning that as much as possible and saying, this is who I really am. And for those that want to turn it into something bad, they just don't understand me. And so in 2018, I actually came in first out of 12 candidates that were running. And really, I wasn't planning on running for mayor because I had a 4-year term. But this year, we had a mayor that really just took the wrong side when it came to so many social justice issues and so much to do with like the BLM issue. And, for her to, as a leader of this great city, to basically say that, if you didn't like the way she ran her city, that you could find another city to live in. And then basically telling everyone that showed up at the BLM protest, I was there too, that we were out there to incite violence when all of our protests in our city have been without any incident, without any violence, very peaceful. I mean, because there were people out there with their kids. There were students out there that were trying to raise the issue of, of injustice. And so for me, when you look at leadership, you want someone that understands their community, and it just wasn't there. And so for me, it was very offensive to hear those remarks, especially like when students at UCI were showing up in protest, asking for relief during the pandemic. She was telling them to go find a job at Amazon. And, these are just not the type of things you want to hear from your leader. And at that time, since no one else was challenging her, she was a 28-year incumbent. And so for me, it was like, all right, you know what, someone's got to do it. And it wasn't an easy race because, again, I was targeted for my race, for my religion, for everything else. And at the end of the day, the people knew the work that I'd accomplished in my 2 years compared to her 28 years. And they knew that they wanted change, that there was changing demographics in our city. So, beating her with a 13,000 vote lead was quite amazing.
Why is it important that Muslims, American Muslims, and obviously all minorities, but in particular American Muslims, why is it important that we run for, first of all, get politically engaged and run for elected office? I believe we've had a record number elected across the country at state and local level. In your view, why is it so important?
There's a saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think for Muslims, we've been on that menu far too long. And so it's time for us to be the policymakers. It's time for us to have that seat at the table where decisions are being made, not only about us, but about so many other people that don't have that voice. And so, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to so much that happens in our daily lives, we just need to have that voice that understands. And if we don't have that, then we see, ourselves declining as a nation, as a city. We see people making judgments on our behalf, and that needs to end.
Agreed. I wanted to get your opinion on the current political stalemate that we're in the sense that we have a president who has refused to accept the transition process, or maybe he's reluctantly coming to accept it, but still hasn't initiated the transition process. I just wonder, as someone who's been involved in community work, is now working at state level, what's your view of this, the political state of the country and this situation in particular?
We all know Trump after these 4 years. We know exactly what he's up to. And this is just another show. So eventually he's going to have to leave. And I think, the fact that his party members are allowing him to behave this way is unacceptable. I think there needs to be a bigger push from his side to basically accept the fact that he has lost. And now he needs to work on transitioning in the new president. And so, eventually it's going to happen, but it's unfortunate that it's taking this route.
And I also wanted to ask you, considering the election result, considering that there were almost 70 million or so Americans who voted for Donald Trump, and I guess to some extent his ideology, I wondered from your experience as an interfaith proponent who's worked hard in your community to bring people together. Does it make you feel despaired about the fact that there were so many people who bought into his ideology? Do you think there's work to be done, or do you think something else was at play?
It's kind of scary, because you have to really wonder whether those people were voting because of what he says or what he does. A lot of it has to do with the economics, right? So you have people that are going to be voting for him just based on economics. But then there's going to be a portion of those people that are voting for him because of the rhetoric that he's brought forward, because of the way that he has basically criminalized so many communities. And so that's really where the concern comes in, is what percentage of those folks are voting for him based on that. And that's going to be hard to find out. Because there's going to be a wide spectrum of people that voted for him for different reasons.
Right, absolutely. So one of the questions, it's probably the last thing I wanted to ask you, was that, partly because of what happened in the last 4 years, that's one of the reasons why American Muslim Today was created. I think there was a lot of helplessness, a feeling of helplessness by a lot of Muslims, feeling like, obviously there were other targeted communities as well, but feeling as if we're sort of helpless, being targeted, and have no recourse. Obviously, one way of pushback is to, I think, get electorally involved, get politically engaged. And I think another route, in particular, that we took at American Muslim Today was to become part of the media, to sort of take control of our narrative and see how and decide for ourselves how Muslims are going to be represented, rather than relying on others or having no opportunity to respond to the way that we're projected in the media generally, or by politicians. So I wonder, in that context, how important do you think it is that we do have our own sort of media and our own forms of representation when it comes to, how Muslims are represented?
Oh, absolutely. It is very important. Like I said before, if you're not at the helm of basically putting forward your own narrative, then someone else is going to do it. And that's really what's been happening in the past, is we've had other media outlets basically define who we are. And so it is very critical that we not only have media, but we have media throughout the nation. I mean, like right here, we have a very right-wing media source that is not even accepting the fact that I'm the first Muslim to be elected mayor for a major city in all of California. I'm the first woman of color to be elected mayor to the city council. And so, when they're not even able to highlight those things, but they want to highlight some person that came in third place and on city council who happens to be a white male. I mean, come on, who's making change right now? It's not him. And so we need people like you and other outlets to really be in there highlighting and supporting Muslims that are achieving, making sure that our voices are being heard, that we're the ones setting the tone for our narrative.
Well, thank you for joining us today. From me and my team, Hadiya Spalic and Maya Geller, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok at American Muslim Today. If you'd like to access more digital content, please feel free to check out our website, AmericanMuslimToday.com. We'll see you next week on The Muslim Viewpoint.